The hungry cub. The night was silent in the ruins of a forgotten battlefield. Cold winds carried the smell of smoke and rusted metal. The stars above burned faintly, watching over the broken world below. A lone human walked slowly among the wreckage, his boots sinking into the ashes of war. He had no name that mattered to history, only a tired traveler searching for scraps of hope. He carried a small bag with food and water, treasures more valuable than gold in this wasteland. Every step he took echoed the silence. As if the dead themselves were listening, the human paused when he heard a faint sound, a whimper, weak and trembling. It was not the cry of a man nor the growl of a beast. It was softer, like a cub's last breath. He followed the sound, pushing aside broken armor and shattered weapons, and there, hidden under a twisted piece of metal, he found her. She was small, smaller than a human child, her body thin and broken. Her fur was dirty, her claws cracked, her glowing eyes half closed from hunger. The human froze, his heart beating fast. He knew what she was, a cub of the feared Chiron species, rulers of war, masters of destruction. Her kind had burned cities, crushed armies, and enslaved planets. Everyone in the galaxy feared the Chiron, yet here was their cub, abandoned and dying. Her tiny body shook with every breath, her glowing eyes flickered with weakness but still carried a sharp light. She looked at him not with trust, but with instinct, the look of a predator forced into weakness. The human hesitated. If anyone saw him helping her, they would call him a traitor. If the Chiron returned, they might kill him for touching their bloodline. And yet, she was just a child. He reached into his bag, his hands shaking. He pulled out a small piece of dried bread and a flask of water. Slowly, he placed them before her. The cub sniffed, her nose twitching, her claws weakly scraping the ground. Then, with trembling movements, she pulled the bread close and ate. Her glowing eyes fixed on him, suspicious, yet desperate. The water dripped from his flask into her mouth, each drop giving her new strength. For the first time that night, the battlefield was silent. Only the sound of a cub swallowing food remained. The human sat beside her, his voice soft. "You should not die here," he whispered. The cub tilted her head, confused, as if no one had ever spoken gently to her. Her people spoke with commands, with power, with anger. But this human's voice carried kindness, a strange warmth she had never known. As the night grew darker, he wrapped part of his cloak around her. She hissed weakly, baring her fangs, but lacked the strength to fight. He only smiled sadly. "You will live," he said, "and maybe, one day, you will remember." The stars above seemed to burn brighter at those words. The cub closed her glowing eyes and slept, her breathing steady for the first time. The human stayed awake, watching, listening, guarding. He did not know why he did it. Perhaps because no one had guarded him when he was small. Perhaps because kindness was all he had left to give. Whatever the reason, his choice was sealed that night. At dawn, the human awoke to silence. The cub was gone, leaving only small claw marks in the dirt. He searched the ruins but found no trace. It was as if she had never been there. Only the memory of glowing eyes remained. The human sighed, pulling his cloak tighter. He walked away from the battlefield, never knowing the truth. That night he had fed not just a cub, but the future Empress of 1,000 worlds, and somewhere beyond the stars. Destiny had shifted. A single act of kindness had planted a seed that would grow into fire. The galaxy would one day tremble at her name. But for now, she was only a hungry cub, saved by the hands of a human who expected nothing in return. Shadows in the stars' years passed, and the human traveler continued his lonely journey across forgotten worlds. The memory of the small alien cub remained in his heart like a fading dream. Sometimes at night, when he closed his eyes, he could still see those glowing eyes staring at him, filled with hunger, pain, and something he could not name. But each morning he awoke to emptiness, the cub long gone, and the galaxy moving forward with its endless wars. The universe had no time for kindness. Empires rose and fell, planets burned, and fleets crossed the stars in endless battles. The human lived quietly, taking small jobs on mining colonies, working on broken ships, doing whatever kept him alive another day. He was no hero, no soldier, only a man who once chose to feed a starving child. And yet, that small choice never left him. Every time he saw a child cry or heard the sound of hunger, he remembered the cub. He wondered, did she survive? Or did the galaxy crush her before she could grow? Rumors began to spread in the deep corners of space, whispers that moved from smuggler to soldier, from slave to ruler. They spoke of a shadow growing in the dark, a force unseen yet unstoppable. Entire fleets vanished without a single survivor. Planets surrendered without battle. And everywhere, a strange symbol was carved into walls, into ships, into the minds of the people. A single glowing eye, sharp and watching. Some said it was a new warlord. Others believed it was an ancient power reborn. But no one knew the truth. The human ignored these stories at first. He had heard too many rumors before, tales of doom that never came true. But something about the whispers felt different this time. There was fear in every voice. Even hardened soldiers lowered their voices when speaking of the eye. The galaxy was trembling. Though no one yet knew why, one night as the human sat alone in a dusty outpost on the edge of a trade route, a merchant spoke loudly, too loudly, his words dripping with fear. "They say an Empress is rising," the merchant whispered, though the whole room leaned closer to hear. "She commands ships the size of moons, and her enemies vanish like smoke. She does not speak to her prisoners. She only watches with glowing eyes." The human froze at those words. Glowing eyes. The memory hit him like a blade to the chest. Could it be? No, it was impossible. The cub was gone, lost 20 years ago, a child who should have died in the ruins, and yet the whispers refused to die. The merchant laughed nervously, trying to turn his fear into a joke. "They say she rules with an iron fist, but some say she is searching, always searching for someone lost." The words cut deeper than the human wanted to admit. Searching. Could she be searching for him? He shook his head, pushing away the thought. He was no one, a forgotten man, and she was only a ghost from his past. Still, he began to notice things. Ships that once filled the sky now gone, leaving empty ports, flags replaced by the same symbol, the glowing eye, entire colonies whispering the same name, Empress. Everywhere he went, the same shadow followed. The galaxy was no longer the same. One night he dreamed of the cub again, but this time she was taller, stronger, her glowing eyes burning with fire. She stood over him, armored and regal, her voice echoing like thunder. "You fed me," she said, "and for that the stars will remember you." He awoke in sweat, his heart racing. Dream or warning he did not know, but the feeling stayed, heavy as stone. The human continued his small life, but deep inside he felt the storm coming. He could not escape it. Every road, every world, every rumor carried the same truth. Something powerful was rising, and though he tried to deny it, he knew the truth in his heart. The cub had survived, and she was no longer small. She had grown into something vast, something the galaxy could not control. But what would she be to him? Would she remember his kindness, or see only another face in the crowd? Would she save him, or would she destroy him as she destroyed all others? The stars themselves seemed to wait for the answer. For the human, the past was returning, carried on the wings of shadow, and soon the galaxy would know her name. The return. The sky over the human world cracked with fire. People stared upward as giant shadows covered the stars. Great ships descended, their hulls like mountains of black steel. Engines roared like thunder, shaking the ground. For the first time in centuries, Earth looked small, weak, beneath the presence of something greater. The human stood among the crowd, his heart pounding. He had seen ships before, smugglers, traders, even war vessels. But nothing compared to this. These ships were not built for trade or travel. They were built to conquer. Every line of their design spoke of power. Every glowing weapon warned of death. The people whispered in fear. "What empire is this?" they asked. Who dares bring war to us now? But no answer came, only the cold silence of engines waiting above. Then the banners appeared. A cross. The sky, holograms lit up. 1,000 symbols projected across the world. A single glowing eye, sharp, endless, and watching. The same eye the human had seen in his dreams. The same eye that haunted him since that night long ago. The crowd fell silent, some trembling, some kneeling. The symbol was not of any empire they knew, it was new, but it carried the weight of ancient power. And then, from the largest ship, she descended, the Empress. Her armor glistened like obsidian under the sun. Her cape flowed like liquid night, and her crown was simple, yet heavy with unspoken authority. Her glowing eyes scanned the world below, piercing through fear, through hope, through time itself. She did not need to speak for the crowd to know she was ruler. Her presence was enough. Yet when she did speak, her voice was calm, sharp, and unshakable. "I am Empress of 1,000 worlds," she said, "and today I return." The human's breath caught. Her eyes locked onto his. It was impossible. In the sea of thousands, her gaze found him. For a moment, he was no longer a forgotten man. He was the traveler in the ruins, the one who had given bread and water. He was the human who whispered, "You will live." Her voice trembled just slightly as she spoke again. "You fed me when the galaxy wanted me dead." The crowd gasped, confused. Who was she speaking to? Why would an empress of such power speak of being weak, of being fed? But the human knew. His knees weakened. His heart thundered. The starving cub had returned, not as a child, not as prey, but as a ruler feared across galaxies. The Empress of 1,000 worlds stood before him, and she remembered. Guards in shining armor surrounded her, their weapons ready, but she raised a hand, stopping them. Her glowing eyes never left the human. Step by step she walked down from her vessel, each footfall heavy with destiny. The people bowed, terrified, but she ignored them. Her attention belonged only to him. When she reached him, she did something that shocked the galaxy. The Empress lowered herself, kneeling before a human. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Soldiers froze. Generals whispered in disbelief. Never had the Empress of the Eye bent her knee to anyone, yet now she did, her voice soft, almost fragile. "You saved me," she said, "and I never forgot." The human trembled, unable to find words. He wanted to say it was nothing, that he had only given food, only water, only kindness, but the truth weighed on him. His simple act had grown into this, into fleets, into power, into an empire ruled by a cub he once saved. The Empress rose, her cape flowing, her voice sharp. Again, "This man," she declared to the galaxy, "is under my protection." She placed a hand upon his shoulder. "He is the protector of the crown." The world erupted. Some cheered in awe, some shouted in anger. Her followers knelt in loyalty, while her enemies whispered rebellion. How could an empress kneel to a human? How could she raise him to such a title? The human's life had changed in an instant, from a forgotten wanderer to the protector of the most powerful being in the galaxy. And though he stood silently, his mind spun with questions. Was this fate a gift or a curse? Would the galaxy honor him or hunt him? Would the Empress remain the cub he saved, or had she become something darker? He did not know. But as her fleets blotted out the stars, he understood one truth. The galaxy would never be the same again. The dead of a life. The galaxy still whispered about the day the Empress knelt before a human. To many it was a miracle, to others a scandal. Never in history had the ruler of 1,000 worlds lowered herself to anyone, let alone a man from a forgotten planet. Her armies had conquered empires, her fleets had swallowed stars, her enemies vanished into dust, and yet, before all, she had bowed to him, the protector of the crown. The human felt the weight of 1,000 eyes. Everywhere he walked, soldiers stared with suspicion, nobles sneered with jealousy, and common people whispered his name in fear or awe. He had not asked for this. He had only offered food to a starving cub long ago, and now that cub was Empress, and he stood at her side. bound by a debt he never asked for. Inside the grand halls of her palace ship, he saw wonders no human had ever seen, walls carved from glowing crystal, banners of stars woven into silk, warriors clad in living armor that breathed like beasts. Yet beneath all the beauty lay shadows. The court was filled with whispers, daggers hidden behind smiles. Generals bowed but clenched their fists in secret. Advisors praised the Empress but plotted in silence. The human felt their hatred pressing down on him. To them, he was not a protector. He was a weakness, a fragile human placed above them all, a reminder of something they could not understand. Mercy. One night, as the stars glowed through the palace windows, the Empress called him to her chamber. She removed her crown and armor, standing not as ruler but as the cub he once saved. Her voice was softer now, almost breaking. "They will never forgive me for raising you," she said, "but I do not care." He tried to answer, to tell her he was nothing special, but she silenced him with a look. "You fed me when I was nothing," she whispered. "I owe you more than life itself." The human felt his chest tighten. He saw the fire in her glowing eyes, the same fire that had once been a faint spark in the ruins, and now it burned brighter than 1,000 suns. But debts are dangerous things, for in the galaxy a debt of life is a chain. The Empress bound herself to him, but by doing so she bound him to her, and others in her court saw their chance. They whispered to each other in hidden chambers. "The human must be removed," they hissed. "He poisons her judgment. He makes her weak. He must die." Soon strange accidents began. His drink spilled with poison, his steps crossed with hidden traps. Assassins moved in the dark, their blades missing by inches, but each time the Empress was there, her fury burning across the halls. She hunted traitors with ruthless precision. Her mercy vanished when his life was threatened. The human watched as she crushed generals with a single command, silenced nobles with one gesture. She had become fire, and all who touched him were burned. Yet in secret the human feared. What if she destroyed everything in her hunger to protect him? What if his kindness long ago had created not just an Empress, but a storm that would drown the galaxy? At night, he lay awake, asking himself the same question. Did I save her or unleash her? The Empress did not see his doubts, or perhaps she chose not to. She only saw the man who had given her life. To her, he was not weakness, but strength, the only anchor in a galaxy of betrayal. And so she gave him more power. She declared him not only protector of the crown, but voice of judgment in her court. When nobles disagreed, she silenced them. When generals protested, she exiled them. Her word was final, her loyalty unshakable, but loyalty breeds enemies. Beyond her palace, rival empires stirred. They heard of the human raised to power, and they laughed. A human, they sneered, sits beside the Empress of the Eye. But laughter turned to fear. For behind the Empress stood fleets greater than storms, and wherever she went, the human walked beside her, silent, watching, remembered by all. Still, the shadows grew. Her enemies sharpened their blades, her allies doubted her mind, and the human knew one truth he could not escape. He was not just protector, he was a target. Every assassin's blade would seek him. Every traitor's hand would reach for him, and in protecting him, the Empress would burn worlds without hesitation. The debt of a life was no gift. It was a chain of fire. And as he looked into her glowing eyes, he realized that chains can strangle both savior and saved. The galaxy did not yet know, but the storm had only begun. The War of Thrones. The galaxy shook as rival empires rose against the Empress. Her kneeling before a human had spread like fire across the stars. To her enemies, it was proof she had grown weak. To her allies, it was a reason to question her judgment. Whispers filled the halls of power, whispers that grew into open rebellion. The War of Thrones had begun. Fleet after fleet gathered at the edge of her empire. Banners of crimson, silver, and gold burned in the void. Thousands of ships armed with weapons that could break planets aimed their fury at her. They thought her distracted, blinded by loyalty to one human. They thought she could be toppled. But they did not know the cub who had once starved. They did not know the fire that still lived inside her. The Empress stood at the bridge of her flagship, the largest vessel in the known galaxy. Her eyes glowed like twin suns. Her voice carried like thunder. She spoke not to her court, not to her generals, but to her people across 1,000 worlds. "They say I am weak," she declared, her words echoing across every comm system. "They say I bow to a human and have forgotten my throne." She raised her hand, her voice sharp as steel. "Let them come. We will burn their fleets until their stars weep ash." The human stood beside her, silent. He did not belong on a warship. He did not belong among fleets. And yet she had brought him here. Every soldier looked at him with awe or hatred. Some believed he inspired her strength, others believed he cursed her with weakness. He felt the weight of it all. Every life, every ship, every battle would somehow lead back to him, and he wondered if his kindness long ago had doomed them all. The first battle came swiftly. A rival empire sent 3,000 ships into her territory. They expected to crush her in a single strike. But when her fleets arrived, the void lit up with fire. Her ships moved like predators, striking with perfect precision. Their weapons cut through enemy shields like knives through silk. The human watched from the bridge as entire fleets were swallowed in flame. Worlds shook as the war began, yet he saw something in her face. Every victory brought her no joy, only silence. She fought with fury, but inside her eyes he saw pain. Perhaps she remembered the cub she once was. Perhaps she wondered if mercy had left her forever. But when she looked at him, the fire returned. He was her anchor, her reason, the chain she would never break. The war spread across the galaxy. Systems burned, planets changed hands, empires crumbled. The Empress led her people with iron will, but everywhere she went, shadows followed. Her court grew restless, her generals grew bitter, some fought loyally, others plotted secretly, and always their eyes returned to the human. They saw him as the spark of this war, the weakness at her side. If he fell, perhaps the Empress would fall with him. One night, as the human stood alone on a balcony of the flagship, he looked out at the endless stars. Each point of light reminded him of the lives burning because of him. He whispered to himself, "Did I save her, or curse the galaxy?" But the stars gave no answer, only silence. Behind him, the Empress appeared, her cloak dark as the void. She stood close, her voice softer now. "You think too much," she said, her glowing eyes watching him carefully. He turned, his voice heavy. "This war is because of me." But she shook her head. "This war is because of them," she replied, sharply. "They fear what they cannot control." Her hand rested lightly on his shoulder. "They fear that I choose my own path. They fear that I choose you." The human looked into her eyes and saw the truth. She would burn the galaxy to keep him safe, and that terrified him more than any enemy fleet, because her kindness to him had turned into fury against the universe, and every battle, every war, every throne toppled would carry his shadow. The War of Thrones raged on. Cities turned to ash. Space itself burned red with endless fire. The Empress stood unbroken, her power unmatched, but deep inside, she remained the cub who once shivered in the ruins, and the human remained the traveler, who once gave bread and water. Together they stood at the center of chaos, bound by a debt neither could escape. And as the war spread like wildfire, the galaxy began to understand one truth. The Empress was not fighting for her throne. She was fighting for him, and that truth would tear the stars apart. The betrayal, the War of Thrones burned across the galaxy. But the greatest danger was not an open battle. It was hidden inside the Empress's own court. Whispers of rebellion had grown louder, shadows thicker, and daggers sharper. Generals who once swore loyalty now doubted her mind. Advisors who bowed in public plotted in silence. And at the center of their hatred stood the human. He had become the symbol of their anger. A fragile man raised above them all. A human whose only power was the Empress's favor. To her, he was protector, savior, anchor. But to them, he was weakness. If the human fell, perhaps the Empress would fall with him. One evening, as the palace ship floated above a conquered world, the betrayal began. The human walked through a quiet corridor, unaware of the eyes watching from the shadows. Guards he trusted turned their backs. Doors he thought locked opened silently. A sharp sting struck his neck. and the world faded into darkness. When he awoke, he was no longer in the palace. Chains bound his hands. The cold air of a prison cell pressed against his skin. Around him stood armored soldiers, their faces hidden, their voices sharp. "You are the weakness of the Empress," one hissed, "and tonight we cut it away." The human struggled, his voice shaking. "She will come for me," he whispered. The soldiers laughed bitterly. "That is why you are alive," they said. "You are the bait, and when she comes, she will bleed." Far away on her flagship, the Empress felt the truth like a blade in her chest. Her court scrambled to report the disappearance. Her generals begged her to stay calm, to plan carefully, but her glowing eyes burned like suns. "Find him," she commanded, her voice trembling with fury. "Bring me the traitors alive." Hours passed, and her enemies revealed themselves. They spread the message across the stars. The protector of the crown was captured. If the Empress wished to see him again, she must face them alone. It was a trap, clear as crystal. Every advisor begged her to ignore it, but the Empress did not hesitate. "I will go," she said, her voice sharp as steel. "He gave me life when I was nothing. I will give him everything." In the prison, the human sat in chains, his heart heavy. He knew she would come, but he feared what she would do to save him. Would she burn worlds, slaughter armies, destroy everything in her path? Was his life worth the galaxy? The thought crushed him. Kindness had once saved a cub, but now it might kill millions. The walls of the prison shook as her fleets arrived. Explosions thundered outside. The screams of soldiers echoed through steel halls. The Empress had come, and with her came fire. Doors melted before her. Enemies fell like dust. Her glowing eyes blazed with fury. Her armor shone like night. And when she reached the cell, the soldiers who guarded him dropped their weapons in terror. The human looked up, his breath caught. She stood there not as ruler, not as Empress, but as storm itself. She broke his chains with her own hands, pulling him close. "You are safe," she whispered, her voice trembling for the first time. But outside, her fury grew. The traitors who betrayed her were dragged before her throne. They begged for mercy, crying that they only wished to save the Empire. Her glowing eyes narrowed, her voice sharp as a blade. "You wished to break me," she said, "but you have only made me stronger." With one command, the traitors were silenced forever. The human watched in silence, fear heavy in his chest. He had never seen her so merciless, so full of rage, and he knew it was because of him. Every scream, every fire, every death, all because they had touched him. That night, as the fires of battle faded, the human sat beside her in the quiet of her chamber. Her armor lay broken on the floor, her crown rested on the table. She looked at him not as Empress, but as the cub he once saved. Her voice was soft, almost breaking. "I almost lost you," she whispered. He placed a hand on hers, his voice low. "You cannot destroy the galaxy for me." But her eyes glowed brighter, her voice steady. "I already have," she said. The human's heart sank. He realized that her love for him was no gift. It was a storm that would never stop. And though he still saw the cub in her eyes, he knew she had become something far greater, far darker. The galaxy would never be safe, because the Empress would never let him go. The Empress of 1,000 worlds, the war reached its final storm. Across the galaxy, stars burned red as fleets clashed in endless fire. The Empress had crushed traitors, silenced rivals, and burned empires. Yet one last alliance remained, a coalition of every enemy who feared her name. They gathered their fleets vast as the night sky, their banners filling the void. 1,000 worlds united to break the Empress of the Eye. The human stood on the flagship beside her, his heart heavy. He had never wanted power, never wanted war, but he could not walk away now. Her glowing eyes searched his face, as if to find strength not in her armies, but in him. "You gave me life," she whispered, "and I will give you a galaxy." The final battle began. The void lit up as millions of ships fired at once. Explosions tore through space. Stars themselves seemed to tremble. Her fleets moved like shadows, striking, fast, unyielding. The Empress stood tall, her voice commanding, her will unshakable. Every order she gave was a hammer of destiny. Her enemies fought with desperation, but she fought with fury. For every shot aimed at her, she answered with fire tenfold. The human watched in silence, his chest tight. He saw ships shatter, lives vanish, worlds burn. And he knew all of this was because of her love, because of the debt of a life. Because once, long ago, he had fed a starving cub. Hours passed. The battlefield turned into a graveyard of broken ships. Her enemies fought bravely, but they could not withstand her fury. One by one, their fleets fell, their banners torn, their leaders silenced. At last, silence returned to the void. Her enemies were gone. The Empress had won, but victory carried no joy. She stood on her throne, her glowing eyes dim, her voice heavy. "I have taken the galaxy," she whispered. "But what have I given back?" The human stepped forward, his voice soft. "You have given them fear," he said. "But you can give them hope." The Empress turned, her fire trembling, her crown felt heavy, her armor cracked. For a moment, she looked like the cub again, small, lost, searching. In that moment, she made her choice. She stood before her people across 1,000 worlds and spoke not of fear, but of change. "No more war," she declared, her voice strong. "No more chains, no more fire. I am Empress of 1,000 worlds, but I will not rule through terror. I will rule through strength and mercy." Her words spread like fire, not of destruction, but of hope. The galaxy trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of something new. Her generals bowed reluctantly. Her soldiers lowered their weapons for the first time. The galaxy saw her not as conqueror, but as ruler. And all of it began with the man beside her, the human who once gave bread and water in the ruins, the protector of the crown. Later, in the quiet of her chamber, she removed her crown and sat. Beside him, her glowing eyes softer now, her voice almost breaking. "They will remember me as Empress," she said, "but you will remember me as the cub." The human smiled faintly, his voice steady. "Yes," he whispered, "I will always remember." The Empress looked out at the stars. 1,000 worlds bowed to her. Fleets waited at her command, her name etched into history forever. But in her heart, she was still the starving cub who had once shivered in the ruins, and in his heart he was still the traveler who whispered, "You will live." The galaxy would remember her as the Empress of the Eye, the ruler who burned empires and ended wars. But she would remember only the moment kindness found her, the moment a human saved her life, and as the stars stretched endless before them, they knew one truth. Kindness had reshaped the galaxy, and the debt of a life had become the crown of 1,000 worlds.